Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. And I am starting off with the Abstract Triangles background stamp from Simon Says Stamp. And I've attached it to the lid of my Misty here, and then I have a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper, and I have the textured side facing up. And I used my anti-static powder tool on the watercolor paper first. And then I'm inking up the stamp with Simon Says clear embossing ink. And then I had to remember to remove the black foam from the Misty here, since this is a rubber and clingback stamp. If it was a clear stamp, I wouldn't have to remove that. And then I've shown this in other videos, but rather than closing the lid, I bring the bottom of the Misty up and around after I've lined up that watercolor paper onto the stamp, and then flip it over there. And that way I can center the watercolor paper where I want it and then get it stamped really, really well, which whoever came up with that idea, I don't know, I thank you. I never thought of it until I saw, and I don't remember whose video I had seen it on, but a lot of people have been doing it, and like I said, I've shown it in a couple of videos, and I love it. It just makes using background stamps so much easier. So yeah, anywho. I stamped it with that clear embossing ink, made sure to press it really well because, like I said, I'm using the texture side of this, even though it's not, with the Canson XL, it's not super textured, but a bit. And then I used Hero Arts white embossing powder and coated all of that, and then let my heat tool heat up, and then I melted all of that with my embossing gun. And then I'm going to funnel all that embossing powder back into the container so I don't knock it over. And then I'm going to tape this piece just to a piece of hardboard here that, again, I've had this for years. I've shown those cutting mats in other videos. I've had a lot of, and then a lot of people were emailing me about hardboard, and it's like, I have it. This is great. You can get these for like $1. They're really cheap. I just like the cutting boards that I got because they're bigger, so I can do more than one piece at a time. You can also get larger pieces of hardboard, just FYI. I like to play around and experiment. So anywho, I taped everything down with painter's tape, and I cut this larger than A2 size. This was about 4 3/4 or 5 inches by, 6 inches roughly, something like that. And then I'm using 4 different colors of distress ink to watercolor this all in. And I'm using crushed olive, broken china, chipped sapphire, and vintage photo distress inks. And I've super sped all of this up as well. And I just mushed my little ink pads onto my little Art Impressions plastic palette here. And then I'm picking up the color with a silver size 4 brush. So I didn't have a whole rhyme or reason to this. I knew the colors I wanted to use because of the color challenge, but I think this is the first time. This is the first time I've watercolored with this background. I've used it before, but I just heat embossed it and left it as is. And I didn't really have like a plan, like where exactly I was going to put, which color. I just started filling them in. And the further along I got, I could start seeing more of the pattern emerge. And then I started kind of layering the triangles, which was really fun. I really loved how the broken china and the crushed olive, the green they make when you mix those two together, layer them together, it's the prettiest green. So that was kind of fun too. It was a little bit unexpected. So I just kept going along and filling in the triangles. Like, no rhyme or reason. Some I separated, some I did side by side. I'm layering here and there, just giving it all a different look. So the only color I was really a tiny bit concerned about was that vintage photo, because you start mixing brown in with some of this and it can get really messy really quickly. But that's why I started with the green and then did the blues to kind of take up most of this whole background. And then I was going to go in with the vintage photo and add that brown. So I did like all this layering, and some of it I did a little bit darker than others, etc. I was just having fun with it. I really, really love this background stamp. Like, depending on the colors you use or the color you use to emboss it or stamp it or whatever, you can get so many fun looks. So I was having a blast with this. It took me about maybe 20 minutes to color in this whole thing. I was just sitting and listening to music and I think I was on the phone for half of it. But yeah, got everything colored in, and then I wanted to add just a little bit of shimmer. So I pulled out my sapphire blue color from the Fine Tech palette that I've shown you guys that I got in a haul not too long ago. This is the first time I've used this palette. But I wanted to use just the blue and just color in a couple of the triangles with it. So I mixed up some water with it and thickened it up a little bit more again, and actually did a couple layers there on a couple of triangles because I really wanted it almost opaque, because it gives the nicest shimmer, but it's not completely overpowering. So I filled in a few of the triangles, not very many, just because I just wanted it just that little bit of something. And then I'm going to let this sit and completely dry, which didn't take very long because by this point, all of the distress watercoloring was dry. So I let the fine tech dry, and then I'm going to peel off all of this painter's tape. And then I'm going to run this through my die cut machine with the largest of Simon Says basic rectangle dies, as well as the Big Dad die. So I lined everything up, taped it into place just with some washi tape, and then lined up the Dad die as well, because I might as well do it all at once. So lined that up, taped it into place, and then ran that through my Big Shot. So once it's die cut, I'm going to pop everything out, and I want to make sure I don't want to lose the letters or the centers of the letters of this. So I'm going to pop these out and set them aside so that I don't misplace anything, which happens all the time. I lost an entire die set for like a week. Anyway, did all that, set everything aside, and then I grabbed some black cardstock and I again used my anti-static powder tool. And then I'm lining up some sentiments from the You Matter stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and just kind of butted them up against each other. And then I'm going to stamp those with that same clear embossing ink onto this black cardstock here. And then I'm just going to use the Hero Arts white embossing powder again to emboss these sentiments. So I did one on one side and one on the other just to save time and effort, because I want to use one on the outside of the card and one on the inside of the card. So stamped everything, melted it with my heat tool, and then I'm going to use my paper trimmer to trim these down into narrow strips. I just used the little wire guide in the center of the cut line here to kind of eyeball it to make sure I've got it trimmed the way I want it. And then I decided to do kind of just an angled cut on the one side for the one on the front. And then I did it on both sides for the piece that I'm going to use on the inside. And I use my paper trimmer for that because I've been saying this a lot lately. I am having more trouble eyeballing things when it comes to cutting anyway. And yeah, I like the safety of using my paper cutter because at least it's guaranteed to be straight most of the time anyway. So trim down the sentiments. And then I've got some heavyweight white cardstock here that was cut to 4 1/4 by 11 inches. And I'm going to score it at 5 1/2 with my Teflon bone folder. So this will be a top folding A2 sized card. And I wanted to make sure that I had actually cut the cardstock properly because I wanted this watercolor piece to cover the entire card. And like I said, the largest die from the Simon Says basic rectangle set is A2 size. So it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. But sometimes my card bases aren't exactly sized the way they should be. Like I said, my eyeballing tendencies they're just not as good as they used to be. So I coated the entire back of this piece with foam tape, and I cut really narrow strips to go in between the letters here just to make sure those don't get pressed down at all. And then I'm going to line that up onto my card base here and press it down. And this was why I didn't want to lose the centers of these letters because I want to stick those into place as well. So I put foam tape onto those and then just use my tweezers to place those in the center of all of these letters. Just ripped out little pieces of my little Scotch foam tape. Not little, this roll is massive. The precious. So adhered these into place, holding them with my tweezers, gets my fingers out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. So added the foam tape and then used my tweezers to hold these little pieces and then get them lined up where they need to be in the center of all of these letters. And then press those down. And then I want to adhere the first sentiment that I had stamped and heat embossed. So I'm just using my Nouveau adhesive. So just a thin little amount of that on the back of this. And then I'm going to adhere it into place below the die cut sentiment. And this specific die cut sentiment, it would look really cool. You could totally do like a shaker card if you want, that sort of thing. I thought about it, but I wanted the like watercolor background to kind of take center stage with this and keep things a little more just simple and clean. So I adhered the sentiment, flipped over the card front, and then trimmed off the excess. And then I decided to use the die cut letters on the inside of the card. It's kind of redundant. You know, you got dad on the outside and dad again on the inside, but really, like as a parent, like mom, 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 dad, dad, you know, it works. So I decided not to do a happy Father's Day sentiment with this, just because the day's already coming up and I don't like doing like specific themes like right up to the day of. I don't know, at least sometimes I don't. I could say that and I'll probably post a Father's Day card on Father's Day. But I just liked how with the sentiments I chose, this could be for anything, like any occasion, birthday, any special occasion, Father's Day, whatever, you know. So I adhered those letters onto the inside of the card with that same adhesive, and then I did the same thing with the stamped and embossed sentiment, and that finished off the card. I thought about adding, you know, some drops or, you know, crystal drops and different things, like nothing too shiny, glittery, whatever, but I really liked just that watercolor background and the shimmer from the Fine Tech, and that was it. So I will have a link to the color challenge in my blog post, which will be linked directly below the video, as well as supplies. All that info will be in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye!